Hi, this is Peter and welcome to the nerdCMO. Today I'm going to do a slightly longer session because I'm going to walk through one of my favorite tools that I just did a short video about the other day. It's using Facebook advertising to do some quick data analytics, to do some customer research on your existing customer base. So I had another video that I referenced before, and I'll show you a link below here so you can see that talked about some of the benefits. And in that video I talked about the fact that maybe I'd set up a quick video to show you exactly how to do that. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to walk you through the process of setting up a custom audience and running some analytics on it. So here we go. So first thing you see is that on my Facebook page, and in fact everyone who's got a Facebook account has access to this, I click on this little triangle and there's a manage ads option. From here I get into the ad interface and you'll see that it's got a little ad campaign for my personal ads with my whole $51 of spending on it. But I'm going to go to the drop down menu here and show all tools, and I'm going to point out a couple of things that you might get started with. So the first thing you want to do is you want to set up a custom audience, and to do that go into the assets area and select audiences. So you'll see here that I've got 3 audiences defined, and I'm going to tell you about how to set these up in just a minute. One is all of my users, and you'll see I've got about 6,200 people here. I've got my active users, which is a custom segment that I created based on my data. It's a subset of those users, and that's about 1,300 people. And then you'll see quite a bit larger, about a 2 million size audience that is a lookalike audience. So I'll explain what each of these are and the benefits of each in just a couple of minutes. But first, let's start with how you create one of these audiences. It's really quite simple. What I did in my case is I leveraged a database of existing customers, and our registered users have given us their email addresses, no phone numbers or anything like that, but just given the email address and the name, Facebook is able to match the customer to their users anonymously, which can give you some really great insights. So let's show you how this works. So to create a custom audiences, I simply go to Create Audiences, and I want to start with a custom audience, and I'll show you how this works. So there are a few different options here. I can use a file of my customer data, and that's what I'm going to use in this example. Or I can use some website traffic if I've instrumented my website with a pixel. We can go into that at a different time. App activity and engagement on Facebook and the Facebook page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose the customer file, because this is something that's really easy to do. And I'm going to say I'm going to choose a file or copy and paste data. From here you'll see that there's some standard data sources that Facebook uses to identify your customer base on Facebook. So email, and it gives you, if you hover over that, some examples of what the format would be. They kind of look like emails. Phone numbers, mobile advertiser IDs, etc. So first name, last name. I really only have 3 data elements in my customer base that I can use: first name, last name, and email. So to do that, I can either go through, there's actually a great little best practices explanation that will show you how to set up your file. It's pretty simple. I'll show you what a file looks like. So I'm going to bring over a file into view here. This is a sample file that I put together. You'll see I'm using dummy data because I don't want to violate any of my users' privacy, of course. And you'll see the file is pretty simple. It's just a CSV file that's got 3 columns in it: email, last name, and first name. And you'll see in the best practices that that's the way that Facebook uses to match the columns LN and FN. In email are the column names, but they'll guess if you don't do it exactly. And I've just put the data underneath it. Now, in my case, again, this is just a sample file, but in my real data, obviously it looked a little bit different because it was different names and emails, and it was quite a bit of a longer list. So from here, once I've got my file set up, I can simply take the file, and in this case, I'll use an example of setting up my newest users, because I may want to take a look and create a segment of my users that are the new ones to see if there's anything different about them. So I'm going to just take the file and drop it in, and click on Next. I can actually give it an audience name. This is going to default to the name of the file, but I may want to create a custom name there. Click on Next, and you'll see it's going to give me a preview of the data. This is, again, the dummy data that I showed here, and I could click Upload and Create. So I'm not going to do that because I'm going to show you an existing set of data that I've set up in advance with these other audiences. You'll see that these two custom audiences I've created from my base are what I call all my users, and this was a list of about 9,500 users that I uploaded, and with just the name and the email address, Facebook was able to match 6,200 of those. And then I chose my active users. So this is a great technique. I simply took existing data that I had. In my case, I knew the number of users, or the specific users who had a large amount of engagement with my app, and I created a segment of those users because I wanted to see if there's anything different about them. And in this case, it created a list that was probably about 1,500 or so names, and it matched about 1,300 of those on these custom audiences. Now, two things that you can do here that are really compelling. One is if I want to go find more people like that, I can simply take this list. So I might want to take my active users because they're the ones who get the most benefit. And I can take that and create a lookalike audience. So that lookalike audience is going to identify people who look like my users. And that will create an audience with a couple of simple steps. I can select the country to target, and I'm going to say that it's the United States. And then I can check on the audience size to sort of go anywhere between 1 and 10% of that country's audience to target the lookalike users within there. So it's going to pick the people who look most like those people in the audience, and I say create audience. So very simple, a couple of clicks. And in this case, I've got an example of all my users. It shows that there are about 2 million that I can target based on the attributes that on Facebook that my 6,200 existing all my users look like. So it's a great way to target them with messages because I know that they're likely to look like the audience that I've already built. So that's a pretty compelling thing to do. Now, once I've got this audience, the other thing that I can do is I can start to do some analytics. This is something that's really valuable. So if I go back to my audiences, show all the tools, what I'm going to do is look at something called Audience Insights. And what Audience Insights will do is it's going to take the data that I have uploaded into Facebook and created my custom audience with, and say, how does that compare to everyone else on Facebook? So again, this is very simple. In the interface, I'm just going to add my users, and it's going to create a lookalike audience for me. So it was just that simple. And within here, you can see the comparison of my audience to the Facebook audience. So you'll note a couple of things. First of all, my audience is the darker numbers, so my audience skews older than Facebook, which isn't surprising because I have more of a professional grade tool. And the next thing it's going to show me is the lifestyle characteristics. So it's got some demographic groups that Facebook has created, and this is based on some external data. It'll tell you a little bit about each group. So the established elite, as an example, is people who don't have school-age children at home, and they have a lot of disposable income, etc. So again, I tend to have sort of a high-value, high-net-worth audience. And you can tell that more of them are married than typical on Facebook. And you can tell that it's also a very highly educated audience. More than 3.5 times the typical Facebook user has, in my audience, has a graduate degree. So that tells you that it's a very educated audience. And even Facebook, because it has job title information, this is incredibly valuable. I can take a broad audience and say, well, what does it map to? You'll see in this case that about 12% of my audience has legal in their job title, which isn't very surprising because I have a tool that is heavily used by attorneys. You'll see that that's 4 times, or an increase of 300%, of the typical 3% of Facebook users. So again, really valuable insights that I can gain from this. So that's a little bit about the demographics I can gain. If you have more data than my less than 10,000 users, you'll be able to also see what page likes they have. So if you've got a very large data set, this can be extremely valuable targeting. You also learn a little bit about location. So this will pick up the largest cities where we have concentrations and show that. And the top countries and languages. It will highlight activity. So you can see how active they are, what kind of devices they use, etc. Tell you a little bit about the household. This is, again, very valuable. Again, not surprising for me. The audience skews very high end in the income and in the housing value area because it's a professional high net worth audience. And it tells you a little bit about spending categories. And finally, a little bit of purchase behavior. It will show you what their purchase behavior is online. And again, you wouldn't be surprised by this, that this audience tends to be more likely to purchase a luxury SUV than the typical Facebook audience, and a little bit less likely with their auto purchasing data that they have with some of the lower cost kind of vehicles, again, because of the audience. So what I've done here is, with a few clicks and just a few minutes of work, I've created a custom audience based on the data that I've gathered from my existing customer base. I've uploaded it to Facebook. It takes a few minutes. One thing I didn't mention is that once you upload that audience for the first time, it will take a few minutes, more than a few minutes. Sometimes it can take a day or more to process the data. It really depends on your audience size. Mine probably took about an hour for it to show up with all the data. And immediately I had these great insights from my data. Now, this data is consistent with what I knew about the audience. I've actually done some fairly detailed market research studies before, got the same data, but paid a lot of money and spent a lot of time getting that data. And because Facebook has such a large audience, we have a unique opportunity as marketers to leverage that data. It's effectively a panel of most of the world these days. With over 1 billion users, you've got a great ability to look at the audience as they report their behavior and as they do their behavior on Facebook and compare it to what your audience is. So again, this is an incredibly valuable tool that you can use for free. Obviously, Facebook wants to provide this because they'd like you to advertise to this group, and they do have some great capabilities. Once I've created these custom groups, again, I can market to my existing customers, which is really valuable because with email opt-out as an example, I may not be able to email these people, but I could potentially send them an ad on Facebook where they are to communicate to them, to let them know that maybe there's a new capability in the product that they didn't know about, as an example. And if I want to go and get new customers, I can use the lookalike audience to target people who have attributes that look a lot like my audience. So that's my deep dive video on the Facebook audience insights and custom audiences. I hope you enjoyed it. It's one of my favorite tools that I can use as a marketer. It's 100% free to get the insights, and I think it's something everyone should take a look at. So thanks again, and I hope you enjoy the video.